The notification lit up my phone at exactly 9:47 p.m. Breaking news, Wall Street mogul. Richard Thornton arrested for financial fraud and assault. I stared at the screen as the live footage showed my father, the man who once threw me into a snowstorm, to die being dragged out of the Plaza Hotel in handcuffs. His face was pale, his expensive suit rumpled, and for the first time in my life I saw fear in his eyes. The same eyes that had looked at me with nothing but contempt 6 months ago, when he slapped the wheelchair out from under my grandfather and left us both to freeze in the December cold. If you are enjoying this story of betrayal and ultimate justice, please hit that like button, subscribe to hear more incredible true stories, and drop a comment below telling me what you would have done in my situation. Your support means everything, but let me take you back to where it all began, to that Christmas Eve that changed everything. My name is Emily Thornton, and for 24 years I believed I was part of a family. I was wrong. I was nothing more than a convenient prop in my father's carefully constructed image of success. Growing up in Manhattan's Upper East Side, I learned early that love in the Thornton household was transactional. My father, Richard, had built his wealth management firm from the ground up, and every relationship in his life, including the one with his own daughter, was measured by its return on investment. My mother died when I was 7. Cancer took her quickly, and with her went any warmth our home had ever known. Richard remarried within a year to Vanessa, a former model, 20 years his junior, who saw me as competition for resources rather than a stepdaughter. She brought her own son Brad into our lives, a spoiled teenager who inherited his mother's cruelty and his stepfather's sense of entitlement. For years, I played my role perfectly. I was the dutiful daughter, the straight-A student at Columbia, the one who smiled at charity galas and never complained when Brad got the new car while I took the subway. I convinced myself that if I just tried harder, if I was just good enough, my father would finally see me, finally love me. The only person who ever truly cared for me was my grandfather, Arthur Thornton. He was the founder of Thornton Capital, the empire my father now ran. After a stroke 5 years ago, left him partially paralysed, and in a wheelchair, Richard moved him into our family's Hamptons estate. Not out of love, but because it looked good for the company image. Family values, he would say in interviews, are the foundation of sound business. But behind closed doors, the truth was uglier than anyone could imagine. My grandfather became invisible, a burden, someone to be hidden away when important guests visited. I watched as his medications were often forgotten, as his requests were ignored, as his dignity was stripped away piece by piece. I tried to help him, spending hours reading to him, taking him for walks around the estate, advocating for better care. Richard would snap at me to stop wasting my time on the old man and focus on something useful. I should have seen it coming. All the signs were there. The way Richard's business partners would suddenly become unavailable after meeting with him. The way he would explode in rage over minor inconveniences. The way he treated the staff like they were subhuman. But I was so desperate for his approval, so consumed by the hope, that one day he would look at me with pride, instead of disappointment that I ignored every red flag. The Christmas party at our Hamptons estate was supposed to be the pinnacle of Richard's career. He had been working on a massive merger for months, a multi-billion-dollar deal that would cement his legacy as one of Wall Street's titans. The house was filled with executives, politicians, and celebrities. Crystal chandeliers sparkled above tables laden with caviar and champagne. A string quartet played in the corner. Everything was perfect. I was helping my grandfather navigate through the crowd. He had insisted on attending, wanting to see old friends from his days running the company. His hand shook as he gripped the wheelchair, a side effect of his medication, but his eyes were bright. He was happy. It was the first time in months I had seen him smile. Then it happened. We were passing by the main dining table where Richard was entertaining his most important business partner, a Chinese investor named Chen, who was crucial to the merger deal. Chen's wife, an elegant woman in a red Chanel gown, was laughing at something Richard had said. My grandfather's wheelchair bumped slightly against her chair, and his trembling hand knocked over a glass of red wine. The liquid splashed across her dress, a crimson stain spreading across the expensive fabric. The room went silent. I immediately began apologizing, grabbing napkins, trying to help. Chen's wife was gracious about it, saying it was no problem, accidents happen. But Richard's face had turned a dangerous shade of red. I could see the vein in his temple pulsing the way it always did before he exploded. "Move aside, Emily," he said, his voice low and threatening. "Dad, it was an accident," I tried to explain. "Let me just—" I said, "Move." He shoved me backwards so hard I stumbled into a waiter, sending a tray of hors d'oeuvres crashing to the floor. Then he turned to my grandfather. The room, full of New York's elite, watched in stunned silence as my father grabbed my grandfather's frail wrist and twisted it. "You useless old fool," Richard hissed. "Do you have any idea what you have just cost me?" My grandfather tried to speak to apologize, but Richard was beyond reason. He slapped my grandfather's hand away from the wheelchair control. Then, with one violent motion, he flipped the entire table. Plates, glasses, and food went flying. Chen and his wife jumped back, wine and sauces staining their designer clothes. "This senile bastard is killing my future," Richard shouted to the room, as if everyone there would agree with him. He pointed at my grandfather, who sat trembling in his wheelchair, confusion and hurt written across his weathered face. I ran to put myself between them. "Dad, please stop. You are making a scene. Think about the deal." Richard's eyes locked onto mine with pure hatred. He spat. "You are just as pathetic as he is. Both of you are nothing but parasites feeding off my success." Brad appeared from somewhere in the crowd, his phone out recording everything. He was laughing, actually laughing, as he live-streamed the entire scene to his Instagram followers. "Look at this family drama, guys," he narrated. "Grandpa strikes again." I tried to grab Brad's phone to stop him from broadcasting our family's destruction to the world, but Vanessa blocked my path. "Stay in your lane, Emily," she said coldly. "This is what happens when people outlive their usefulness." Richard called for his security team. 2 large men in black suits appeared. "Strip her of anything valuable," he ordered, gesturing to me. "She does not deserve anything that came from my money." I could not believe what was happening. The security guards physically removed my coat, a gift from my mother that I treasured. They took my phone, my wallet, even the simple necklace my grandmother had given me before she died. All of it gone, while a room full of people watched and did nothing. Then Richard turned his attention back to my grandfather. The old man still sat in his wheelchair, tears streaming down his face, trying to understand what was happening. My father walked over, grabbed the wheelchair, and with shocking brutality, pushed it toward the French doors that led to the snow-covered patio. "If you want to live, you can crawl," Richard said. His voice was calm now, which made it even more terrifying. "I never want to see either of you failures in my city again." He threw open the doors. The December wind howled into the warm room, bringing with it a blast of freezing air and snow. The temperature outside was well below 0. My grandfather did not have his coat. Neither did I. "Dad, please," I begged, grabbing his arm. "He will die out there." Richard shook me off. Then he noticed the small, orange pill bottle clipped to my grandfather's wheelchair. His heart medication. The pills that kept him alive. Without a word, my father unclipped the bottle, held it up so everyone could see, and then threw it to the marble floor. The plastic shattered. Pills scattered across the ground like tiny white pebbles. He brought his shoe down, grinding the pills into powder. "If you want to live, crawl," he repeated, then physically shoved the wheelchair outside into the snow. I ran after my grandfather, but the doors slammed shut behind us. I heard the lock click. Through the glass, I could see the party resuming. People turned back to their conversations, their drinks, their networking, as if we had never existed. The freezing air hit me hard. I only had on a thin party dress and heels, nothing else. My grandfather was sitting in his wheelchair on the patio, snow piling up on his shoulders. His whole body was shaking. I did not know if it was from the cold or from what had just happened. "Grandpa," I called out, running to him. "We have to move. We have to find shelter. He looked up at me and I saw something in his eyes that broke my heart. Not surprise, not even anger, just a deep, profound sadness, as if this was exactly what he had expected all along. "I am so sorry, Emily," he whispered. "I am sorry you had to see what he has truly become." "Do not apologize," I said, fighting back tears. "We need to focus. Can you walk at all?" He shook his head. "The cold is making it worse. I cannot feel my legs." I looked around desperately. The estate was massive, but we were far from any neighbours. The service road was at least 2 miles away through the snow. I had no phone, no money, no way to call for help. The temperature was dropping by the minute, and the wind was picking up into what the forecast had warned would be a major nor'easter. I made a decision. "Okay," I said, positioning myself in front of the wheelchair. "I am going to get you on my back. We are going to that old bus shelter we passed on the service road. Do you remember it? Emily, you cannot carry me that far. Watch me." It took several tries, but I managed to get my grandfather onto my back. He was lighter than I expected, wasted away from years of neglect. I kicked off my heels and started walking through the snow in my bare feet. Each step was agony. The cold burned, but I kept moving. I talked to keep us both conscious. I told him stories from my childhood memories of my mother plans for the future. Anything to keep his mind focused, to keep him from giving up. He drifted in and out of consciousness, mumbling apologies, telling me to leave him and save myself. "I will never leave you," I promised. Never. After what felt like hours, but was probably only 45 minutes, I saw it. The old bus shelter abandoned years ago when the route changed. It was barely more than 3 walls and a roof, but it was shelter. I practically collapsed inside, lowering my grandfather as gently as I could to the concrete bench. My feet were bleeding. My dress was torn and soaked through. I could not feel my fingers. But we were out of the wind. I used my body to cover my grandfather, trying to share what little warmth I had left. He was so cold, his lips turning blue, his breathing shallow. "Stay with me, Grandpa," I begged. "Please stay with me." "Emily," he said, his voice barely a whisper. "In my jacket pocket, left side, there is a key." "What?" "A safety deposit box, Bank of Manhattan, under my name. If something happens to me, you need to get there. Promise me." "Nothing is going to happen to you," I insisted, but I found the key anyway. A small silver key on a chain. I put it around my neck. We huddled together through that endless night. I sang every song I could remember. I rubbed his hands to keep his circulation going. I refused to let him slip away. Several times his breathing became so faint I thought I had lost him. But each time he would take another shaky breath, and I would cry with relief. Dawn came eventually, grey and cold. My grandfather was alive, but barely. His lips were cracked and bleeding from the cold. His skin had a greyish tint. I knew we needed help soon, or we would not make it another day. I had hidden a few dollar bills in my shoe, a habit from my mother, who always told me to keep emergency money somewhere unexpected. It was not much, maybe $20, but it was enough. There was a bodega about a quarter-mile down the road. I left my grandfather bundled in my dress jacket and ran. The bodega owner, a kind older man named Mr. Patel, took one look at me barefoot and half frozen and immediately gave me his phone. I called 911, giving them our location. Then I bought water and a heat pack with my remaining money and ran back to the shelter. The ambulance arrived within 15 minutes. The paramedics were shocked at our condition. Mild hypothermia, they said. Another hour and it would have been critical. They wanted to know what happened. I told them we got lost in the storm. Our car broke down. I could not bring myself to tell them the truth. Not yet. At the hospital, I refused to leave my grandfather's side. The doctors stabilised him, got his body temperature back to normal, treated his frostbite. He would recover, they said, but he was lucky. Very lucky. I was treated for my own hypothermia and given antibiotics for the cuts on my feet. A social worker came by asking questions. I stuck to my story about getting lost. She did not believe me I could tell, but she could not prove otherwise. While my grandfather slept, I sat in the hospital chair and tried to process what had happened. My own father had tried to kill us. Not in a moment of passion, but deliberately, coldly in front of dozens of witnesses. and not one person had tried to stop him. Not one person had called for help. I thought about the key around my neck. What was in that safety deposit box that was so important? My grandfather mentioned it while he was freezing to death. The next morning, my grandfather was awake and lucid. "Emily," he said, his voice stronger than I had heard in years. "It is time I told you the truth about a great many things." "What do you mean?" "I have not been entirely honest with you, child. With anyone, really." I pulled my chair closer. "I do not understand. 5 years ago, when I had my stroke, the doctors told me I might never walk again. They said I would need constant care. Your father saw an opportunity. He convinced me to sign over operational control of the company to him. He promised to take care of me to preserve my legacy. Grandpa, I know, I have seen how he treats you, but what you do not know," he continued, "is that I never signed over everything. I kept something. A golden share." "A what?" "In corporate law, a golden share is a nominal share that gives its owner special voting rights. In our case, it gives me absolute veto power over any major decision the company makes. Your father thinks I am just a figurehead. He has no idea I can stop anything he does with a single vote. Why have you never used it?" "Because I needed to see his true nature. I needed to know without question what kind of man he had become. And now I know." He reached out and took my hand with his, no longer shaking. "I have been pretending, Emily." The confusion, the weakness, most of it was an act. I needed to observe, to wait, to understand exactly how far he had fallen. I stared at him in shock. "You have been pretending to be senile." "Not entirely. The stroke was real, the initial paralysis was real. But I have been doing physical therapy in secret for 3 years. I can walk with assistance. I can think clearly. And I have been watching your father destroy everything I built, one unethical deal at a time. Why did you not tell me?" "Because you still believed in him. You still hoped he could change. I could not take that hope from you. You had to see the truth yourself." Tears streamed down my face. "He tried to kill us, Grandpa." "I know, and now we were going to destroy him, legally, financially, and publicly." Over the next hour, my grandfather explained everything. He had been working with a lawyer, a man named Lucas Warner, for the past 2 years. Lucas was known in legal circles as a shark, someone who specialized in taking down corrupt executives. Together, they had been building a case against Richard. More than that, my grandfather had been quietly buying up the debt my father's company had accumulated. Through shell corporations and offshore accounts, he now controlled nearly 60% of Richard's outstanding loans. Loans my father did not even know existed in my grandfather's portfolio. "The company is overleveraged," my grandfather explained. "Your father has been gambling with investor money trying to cover losses with risky trades. The merger he is so desperate to close is not about expansion. It is about survival. Without that Chinese investment, Thornton Capital will collapse within 6 months." "How do you know all this?" "Because I still have friends in the industry. People who remember when I ran things with integrity. They have been keeping me informed." "The key around my neck," I said suddenly. "The safety deposit box." He smiled. "Contains documentation of everything. Financial records, recorded conversations, evidence of fraud, and something else. The original articles of incorporation for Thornton Capital with my golden share clearly defined. We need to get to that bank." My grandfather nodded. "But first, we need to get out of this hospital without your father knowing we survived." It turned out Richard had not even checked on us. He had assumed we were dead, or at least would not dare to return. The merger talks were proceeding. The Chinese investors had been placated. Brad's Instagram video had been scrubbed from the internet, though not before several people had downloaded it. Richard thought he had won. We checked out of the hospital using fake names my grandfather had arranged through Lucas. The lawyer met us outside with a car and drove us to a small private apartment in Queens. It was nothing like the luxury I had grown up with, but it was safe. "Emily," my grandfather said as we sat in that modest living room, "what I'm asking you to do will not be easy. It will mean watching your father lose everything. It will mean becoming someone you have never been before. Someone hard. Someone willing to fight." I thought about that night in the snow, about the pills crushed under his shoe, about the way he had looked at me like I was garbage. "I am ready," I said. "Tell me what to do." The transformation began immediately. Lucas brought in a team, a stylist, a business coach, a therapist to help me process the trauma while staying focused on our goal. Over the next 6 months, I became someone new. I cut my hair shorter, sharper. I learned how to speak with authority, how to command a room. I studied finance law corporate strategy. My grandfather tutored me personally on the intricacies of the business. I learned every dirty trick, every loophole, every pressure point. Meanwhile, Lucas and his team were working behind the scenes. They had Brad's video saved by several anonymous accounts before it was deleted. They had financial records showing Richard's fraud. They had testimonies from employees he had abused, investors he had swindled, partners he had betrayed. Most importantly, they had planted the seeds for the takedown at exactly the right moment, the merger gala. Richard had planned the event as a victory celebration. It was to be held at the Plaza Hotel, broadcast live to financial news networks around the world. He would announce the successful merger, cementing his reputation as a Wall Street genius. He had no idea we were about to burn his world to the ground. The night of the gala, I stood outside the plaza in a white power suit, custom tailored to perfection. My grandfather sat in his wheelchair beside me, but this time he was not hunched and frail. He sat upright, dignified, his eyes sharp. Behind us was Lucas and a team of lawyers, and beside them, FBI agents in plain clothes waiting for our signal. "Ready?" my grandfather asked. I nodded, unable to speak. My heart was pounding so hard I thought it might burst from my chest. The ballroom was exactly as I imagined, glittering chandeliers, tables draped in white silk champagne flowing freely. Richard stood on the stage, Vanessa beside him in a gold gown that probably cost more than most people made in a year. Brad was at a table near the front, already drunk, laughing too loudly. Richard was in the middle of his speech, talking about family values and integrity, when the large screens behind him suddenly went black. The room fell silent, confused. Then the screens flickered back to life. Brad's video played in crystal clear high definition. Every guest in the room watched as Richard slapped his disabled father's hand, flipped a table, ordered his daughter stripped of her possessions, destroyed life-saving medication, and threw an old man in a wheelchair out into a blizzard. The crowd gasped. People started pulling out their phones, recording the recording. Richard stood frozen on the stage, his face turning purple. "What the hell?" he shouted, trying to get the AV team's attention. "Turn that off. Turn it off now." But the video kept playing. And when it finished, the screen switched to financial documents. Records of fraud, embezzlement, insider trading. All of Richard's crimes laid out in painful detail. That was when we walked in. The main doors opened and every head turned. I pushed my grandfather's wheelchair down the centre aisle, my heels clicking on the marble floor with each confident step. Lucas and his legal team followed. The FBI agents flanked us. When Richard saw us, his face turned white as a sheet. His eyes went wide with shock. "You..." he gasped, stumbling backward. "But you were supposed to die out there." I stopped at the foot of the stage and looked up at my father. I was not wearing the frightened, desperate expression of the girl he had thrown away. I was calm, composed, and utterly in control. "Surprise," I said. "We survived. No, thanks to you." My grandfather, with Lucas's help, stood up from the wheelchair. The room collectively gasped. Richard took a step backward, nearly falling off the stage. "Hello, son," my grandfather said, his voice carrying across the silent ballroom. "I think we need to have a conversation about your future. Or rather, your lack of one." I pulled out a folder and threw it onto the stage at Richard's feet. "Congratulations, Dad. You are officially bankrupt. Those are foreclosure notices. Every property, every asset, every share of stock you think you own is gone. We have been buying up your debt for 6 months. As of 5 minutes ago, we called it all in." Richard fell to his knees, scrambling to pick up the papers, his hand shaking. "No," he stammered. "The merger. Chen's investment." "Chen pulled out," my grandfather said. "We showed him the real financial state of your company. Turns out international investors do not like partnering with frauds." Vanessa suddenly appeared at Richard's side, her face a mask of shock. Richard, what is he talking about? What debt? He has been gambling with investor money. I explained, my voice echoing in the silent room. Trying to cover losses with illegal trades. He has been committing fraud for years. And now the FBI is here to make it official. On cue, the FBI agents move forward, pulling out handcuffs. Richard Thornton, you are under arrest for securities, fraud, embezzlement, and assault. No, Richard screamed, trying to run. The agents tackled him, pinning him to the stage. No, this is not happening. Emily, help me. I am your father. Help me. I stared down at him, this man who had treated me like garbage, who had nearly killed his own father, who had destroyed so many lives in his quest for wealth and power. You stopped being my father the night you left us to die, I said quietly. Vanessa suddenly lunged at me, her carefully composed facade cracking. You little bitch, she shrieked. You have ruined everything. But Lucas stepped between us. I would not do that if I were you, Mrs. Thornton. We have evidence of your involvement in the money laundering scheme. The agents have a warrant for you as well. Vanessa's face went white. She looked at Richard, who was being dragged away in handcuffs, then back at me. She tried to run, but 2 female FBI agents caught her at the door. Brad stood up from his table, his phone out, still recording everything. This is crazy, he said, laughing nervously. This is absolutely insane. I walked over to him. Put the phone down, Brad. Come on, Emily. This is gold. My followers are going to love this. My grandfather appeared at my side. Hello, Bradley. Remember all those videos you have been making? The luxury lifestyle content funded by embezzled money. The FBI will want to talk to you about that too. Brad's smile vanished. Wait, what I did not know. Ignorance is not a defense, Lucas said smoothly. Enjoy your moment of internet fame. It may be your last for quite some time. As Brad was led away by agents, I turned to face the room full of stunned socialites and business executives. Most of them had stood by and watched my father abuse us. Not one had called the police. Not one had offered help. To everyone here, I said, my voice steady, you all witnessed abuse and did nothing. You prioritized your business relationships over basic human decency. I hope you can live with that. The room remained silent. Several people had the grace to look ashamed. Most just looked uncomfortable, eager to leave and distance themselves from the scandal. Chen approached me, his expression unreadable. Miss Thornton, he said with a slight bow, I owe you an apology. I should have intervened that night. Yes, I said bluntly, you should have, but thank you for acknowledging it. He handed me his business card. If you decide to rebuild the company properly, I would be interested in discussing legitimate opportunities. Your grandfather was a man of honor. I believe you may be as well. I took the card. I will consider it. Over the next few weeks, the scandal exploded across every news outlet. Brad's video went viral. The financial fraud was dissected by experts. Richard, Vanessa, and Brad all faced multiple charges. Richard was sentenced to 15 years in federal prison. Vanessa got 7. Brad, as a first-time offender who cooperated with authorities, received 3 years and massive fines. The trial was brutal. I had to testify, had to recount every moment of that night. Richard's lawyers tried to paint me as a vengeful daughter, but the evidence was overwhelming. The jury deliberated for less than 2 hours. When the guilty verdict was read, Richard looked at me across the courtroom. For a moment, I saw something in his eyes. Not remorse, not apology, just rage, pure impotent rage that his own daughter had destroyed him. I felt nothing, not satisfaction, not sadness, just a quiet sense of closure. My grandfather officially transferred control of Thornton Capital to me. I was 25 years old, suddenly the CEO of a financial firm. It was terrifying, but I had learned from the best. The first thing I did was change the name to Arthur and Associates, honouring the man who actually built the company with integrity. The second thing I did was clean house. Every executive who had been complicit in Richard's schemes was fired. We brought in new leadership focused on ethical investing and sustainable growth. I also established a foundation to help victims of financial abuse and elder abuse. We funded shelters' legal aid and education programs. Every time someone told me thank you, I thought about that night in the snow, and I was grateful I had survived to make a difference. My grandfather retired to a beautiful beach house in the Hamptons, the same estate where we had almost died. I had bought it back and renovated it completely, erasing every trace of Richard's presence. He spent his days reading Walking on the Beach and video calling with me to discuss business strategy. He was happy, truly happy. As for me, I had my own apartment in Manhattan, modest by Thornton standards, but perfect for my needs. I worked long hours, poured myself into rebuilding what my father had destroyed. It was exhausting, but fulfilling in a way nothing else had ever been. 6 months after Richard's conviction, I visited him in prison. I had not planned to, but my therapist suggested it might give me closure. I needed to see him one final time, not as his victim, but as the woman I had become. The prison was cold and grey, nothing like the luxury he had once known. Richard was brought into the visiting room in an orange jumpsuit, his face gaunt, his hair greying. He sat down across from me, separated by a plexiglass divider. For a long moment we just stared at each other. "Why are you here?" he finally asked. "To gloat." "No," I said. "To tell you that I forgive you." He laughed bitterly. "I do not want your forgiveness." "I know, but I'm giving it anyway. Not for you, for me. I am letting go of the anger, the pain, all of it. You do not get to control my life anymore." "You ruined me, Emily." "No, Dad. You ruined yourself. I just made sure everyone else knew what you really were." He leaned forward, his eyes hard. "You think you are better than me. You used the same ruthless tactics I would have used." "The difference," I said quietly, "is that I used them for justice, not for greed. I used them to protect people, not to exploit them. That is the difference between us." We sat in silence for another minute. Then I stood up. "Goodbye, Richard," I said. "I will not be coming back." As I walked away, he called after me. Emily, please, do not leave me here alone." I did not turn around. He had left me alone in a blizzard to die. This was justice. Standing here now, looking at the Time magazine with my face on the cover, the headline reading, "The New Face of Ethical Finance," I think about how far I have come, from that terrified girl in the snow to a woman who rebuilt an empire on principles instead of exploitation. My grandfather was right. Sometimes you have to lose everything to discover what you are truly made of. Sometimes the people who should protect you are the ones you need protection from. And sometimes the greatest revenge is not destruction but transformation. I learned that family is not defined by blood, but by the people who show up when everything falls apart. I learned that wealth means nothing without integrity. I learned that true power comes not from control, but from compassion. Most importantly, I learned that you can survive anything if you refuse to give up. That night in the snow could have killed us. It should have killed us. But we survived, and we thrived, and we turned our pain into purpose. If you have ever felt worthless, if anyone has ever made you believe you do not matter, I want you to know this. You have more strength inside you than you realize. You have the power to change your story. You have the right to demand respect, to set boundaries, to walk away from anyone who treats you as less than you are worth. I would love to know your thoughts. Have you ever walked away from someone who was supposed to love you? What finally made you choose yourself? Share your experience in the comments. It might be exactly what someone else needs to hear today. If my story touched you, please like and subscribe. Every share could reach someone who is still sitting in their own snowstorm, waiting for permission to leave. Remember, you are never as powerless as someone wants you to believe. Stand up, speak out, take back your life. You deserve so much more than what they are offering. Thank you for listening to my story.